Somewhere, in a world made entirely of blocks, the sun is rising. It comes up slowly, the way all good things come, without announcing itself, without asking permission. One moment the sky is the deep, quiet blue of night, and then, at the very edge of the horizon, a line of pale gold appears, and the world begins again. This world has no name. It was not given one when it was made. It simply all is. A place of forests and mountains and rivers and caves. A place of plains that stretch to the horizon in every direction, covered in tall grass that moves in a wind you cannot feel but can always see. It is, in every sense of the word, a quiet world. And in this world, on a small hill at the edge of a forest, there is a house. It is not a grand house. It is not the kind of house that impresses visitors or commands attention from a distance. It is the kind of house that was built slowly over time by someone who was not in a hurry. Someone who added a room when they needed one, and a window when the light felt wrong, and a garden wall when the morning seemed to need containing. The walls are made of oak wood, weathered to a deep honey color by many seasons of sun and rain. The roof is stone, smooth, gray, solid. There is a chimney at one end, and from the chimney, even now, a thin ribbon of smoke rises and unravels slowly into the morning air. Someone is home. Someone has always been home. Her name is Mara. She is the last of the builders, though she does not think of herself that way. She simply thinks of herself as someone who lives on a hill, at the edge of a forest, in a world made of blocks. Someone who wakes before the sun and goes to bed after the stars. Someone who knows every tree in her forest and every fish in her river and every stone in the path that leads from her door down to the water's edge. She has lived here a long time. Long enough that the house has settled into the hill the way old things settle. Not perfectly level, not perfectly square, but with a solidity that feels more permanent than any perfect thing ever could. She does not remember precisely when she built the first room. She does not remember precisely when she planted the first tree in the orchard behind the house, or laid the first stone in the garden wall, or hung the first lantern above the door. She only knows that she did, that it was done with care, and that it has been here ever since. Mara's mornings began at the river. She would walk the path from her door, stepping over the same route she had always stepped over, passing the same apple tree she had always passed, and she would sit at the river's edge and watch the water move. The river came from somewhere in the mountains to the north and went somewhere in the valleys to the south, and in between it passed through her world in long, clear curves, making sounds that had no name but that felt like thinking out loud. She kept a small boat moored to a post at the river's edge. Nothing elaborate, just boards and a flat bottom and 2 oars worn smooth from years of use. Sometimes she rowed upstream for an hour or 2 in the mornings, watching the forest change around her, watching the kingfishers dart from branch to branch above the water like small bolts of impossibly blue light. She never went far. She never needed to. The forest around her house was deep and old. Its trees were tall enough that, standing at the base of the largest ones, you could not see the sky directly overhead. Only, when the wind moved the canopy, brief flashes of blue between the leaves. The floor of the forest was soft with moss and fallen leaves and the roots of things that had been growing for longer than Mara could measure. She knew paths through the forest that did not appear on any map, because she had made them herself slowly, over many years of walking. Paths that led to particular clearings where the light came in at a specific angle in the late afternoon. Paths that curved around stands of birch trees whose white trunks glowed in the early morning. Paths that nobody else knew, because nobody else had ever been here. This was her world, all of it, and she had made it, piece by piece, with her own hands. In the afternoons, she built, not urgently, not with a plan drawn up on paper or a schedule to follow. She built the way water finds its way downhill, following the natural logic of the next thing that needed doing. A stone wall that wanted extending, a bridge across a narrow point in the river that she had been meaning to build for a season, a platform in the branches of the great oak at the edge of her garden, just high enough to sit above the roof of the house and watch the sun go down. She had learned, over years of building, that the best things were never finished in one sitting. They wanted time. They wanted to be looked at and walked away from and returned to. They wanted to be lived with for a while before they were completed, so that by the time the last block was placed, the whole thing felt not like something she had constructed, but like something that had grown there, like it had always been there, waiting to be found. There was one place in Mara's world that she did not go often, not because it frightened her. She had explored most of it long ago, in the early days when everything was new and every tunnel was an invitation. She had mapped its passages in her memory, the wide chamber where underground lake reflected the ceiling in perfect stillness, the narrow corridor that opened unexpectedly into a cavern full of glowing stone, the deep vertical shaft where, if you stood at the edge and dropped a single block, you could count to 3 before it hit the bottom. She knew the cave well, but she went there only occasionally, on evenings when the surface world felt too open, too bright, when she wanted walls around her and stone above her and the particular quality of silence that exists only underground. The entrance to the cave was behind the waterfall at the northern edge of her land, a curtain of falling water that she had always found beautiful, even before she discovered that behind it, a passage led down into the dark. She would light a torch at the entrance and carry it down the first passage, past the shelf where she kept spare supplies, past the point where the passage split into 3, and she always took the left fork, down and down until the air changed. Underground air is different. It is cooler and stiller, and it carries a particular quality that she had never found a precise word for. Not damp, exactly, not cold. Something between the two. Something that felt ancient, as though the air down here had been here for a very long time, undisturbed, waiting in the dark the way all things that have been waiting a very long time learn to wait. Completely, without urgency. Deep in the cave, there was a chamber she had found only by accident many years ago. She had been following a sound, a faint, distant sound that she could not identify, a sound that seemed to exist at the very edge of hearing, half sound and half feeling. And the passage had opened without warning into a space large enough to stand in, with a ceiling high enough that her torchlight could not reach it. The walls of the chamber were covered in a material that glowed softly, a blue-green light, gentle and constant, like the light from a deep-sea creature, something that has found a way to be its own lantern in a world where no other light reaches. She had sat in that chamber for a long time. She did not know how long. Time moves differently underground. Without the sun to mark it, without the progression of light and shadow that the surface world uses to tell you where you're in the day, time becomes elastic. An hour feels like 10 minutes. 10 minutes feels like an hour. All of it feels like now. She had sat in the glowing chamber and felt, for reasons she could not explain, completely at peace, as though the earth itself was holding her, as though the weight of all that stone above her was not a burden but a comfort, not pressing down on her, but covering her, the way a blanket covers you, the way darkness covers you when you close your eyes. Evenings in Mara's world were a ceremony, not a formal one, not one that required preparation or intention, but a ceremony in the sense that it was done the same way every time, with a care that made the ordinary feel significant. She would return to the house as the sun began to lower. She would light the lanterns, first the one above the door, then the ones inside, then the one in the garden that she had placed on a post beside the apple tree, so that the tree was always lit softly from below, its branches full of warm shadow. She would make her fire. The fireplace was at the center of the house, and everything in the house was arranged in relation to it. The chair with the worn armrests faced it. The small table with the bowl of fruit and the book she was always in the middle of stood beside it. The thick rug on the floor in front of it had faded to a soft, undifferentiated warmth, not red anymore, not orange, just the color of something that had absorbed many years of firelight. She would sit in the chair with her book and read until the words began to blur, until the fire burned down to coals. Until the sounds from outside, the wind in the leaves, the distant call of an owl, the occasional creak of the house settling into the night, became less distinct, less particular, and merged into a single soft sound, like breathing. On some evenings, she would hear rain beginning. It started, as rain always started, almost imperceptibly. A sound at the edge of consciousness, not quite a sound yet, more a change in the quality of silence. A slight darkening of the light through the window. A smell, coming in through the gaps around the door, of earth and stone and something electric and clean. And then, softly, the first drops on the roof. That sound. The particular sound of rain on a solid roof, on stone and wood and the solid substance of a house that has been built with care and has stood for a long time and will stand for longer. That sound is one of the most reassuring sounds in any world, because it means you are inside, because it means the rain is out there and you are in here. And between you and the rain there is a roof and walls and a fire and everything that you have made and gathered and placed with care over the years of living in one place and knowing it completely. And now the night is complete. Mara sets her book down on the small table. She does not mark her page. She will remember where she was. She always does. The fire is coals now, orange and slow. Breathing. She does not put it out. She lets it find its own end, the way all good fires do. Outside, the rain is falling steadily now. On the roof of the house, on the stone path down to the river, on the leaves of the apple tree in the garden, on the river itself, which is receiving the rain the way it receives everything, without complaint, without ceremony, simply adding it to itself and carrying it on. Somewhere beneath the house, deep in the earth, the cave is dark and still and full of that soft blue-green glow. The underground lake is perfectly flat. The air in the deep chamber is cool and ancient and undisturbed. Everything down there is patient. Everything down there has learned, over a very long time how to simply oi be. And up here, above the forest, above the hill and the house and the garden and the river, the sky is moving. Clouds, heavy with rain, rolling slowly from west to east. And behind them, every now and then, a very brief, very distant light. Not threatening, not alarming, just the storm, doing what storms do. Moving, breathing, crossing the sky at its own unhurried pace. And the thunder comes slowly after it, low and long and soft, like something vast turning over in its sleep, like the earth settling, like the world deciding to rest. You are inside, you are warm. There is nothing in this world that needs your attention tonight. The house is solid, the fire is low. The rain on the roof is steady and soft, and it will be here all night, keeping you company, requiring nothing from you, nothing at all. Let your hands go loose, let your shoulders drop. Feel the weight of your body settling, the way the house settles into the hill, the way the hill settles into the earth, the way the earth holds everything, quietly, without effort, the way it always has. The rain is heavier now. You can hear it on everything. On the roof, on the leaves, on the stone path, on the river, which is full now, carrying the night and the rain and the sound of everything downstream, away into the dark where you do not need to follow. Let it go. Somewhere in the forest, an owl has gone quiet. Somewhere in the cave, the blue-green light is glowing steadily, as it always does, as it always will, deep and patient and undisturbed. Somewhere at the edge of the world, the sun is already preparing to rise again tomorrow. But that is tomorrow, and this is now. This is the sound of rain on a roof in a world made of blocks and care and time. This is the sound of thunder, rolling across a dark sky, fading. This is the sound of a fire that has burned down to its last warmth. And you are exactly where you are supposed to be. Warm, still, safe. Let the rain carry you now. Let the thunder be your blanket. Let the soft blue glow from deep in the earth be your last thought. Something ancient, something patient, something that has been here a long, long time and will be here when you wake. Sleep well.